Loch, welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to share your wisdom with us in this way. I'd like to start by asking you, I know you've done several spiritual retreats with Dick Schwartz, and I'm curious about that connection and the complementarity of your work and how you met. So anything you can share about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, Derek, and really enjoy sharing with IFS practitioners and others who work with their parts and are interested in meeting themselves. So just to start out to say that self is available and not an advanced state for Olympic athletes of meditation, that we all can access this, which is considered the most valuable dimension of our beingness in most wisdom cultures throughout time and throughout the world. So I had done a joint degree program with Columbia University Social Work School and Union Theological in psychology and spirituality. And my second year, I went on a fellowship to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal. And that's where I studied both wisdom traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Theravada in the university and in the monasteries, and then went up to meet the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. And he had just done his first teaching on what's called Dzogchen, which is the kind of a direct path teaching in one of the related traditions. And I put my hand up and said, who should I go study with? And he said, there's a guy, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. I went over immediately to Nepal by jumping on a bus in a long trek, and was immediately within minutes pointed out. He did these direct exercises that took minutes to show me what self was.
Wow.
And so I immediately knew, okay, this is unbelievable. I was laughing and crying, and I'd say, are you kidding me? This is what I've been looking for, and it's right here and available. So that led me, as I went back, to study psychology, and as I went into my training as a social worker, into inpatient psych and psych emergency room and outpatient, working in an outpatient clinic for years, I started to study other psychological methods, and most of them were parts-based systems. So Gestalt, psychosynthesis, Jungian psychology with personas and masks, and different, even some with addiction, with Bradshaw and Pia Melody. So all these systems are parts-based systems, but none of them have self as defined by the wisdom traditions as the primary dimension. So I started adding that and working with clients, both outpatient psychiatric clients who are living in halfway houses and private practice. And it seemed everyone was able to access it slowly or quickly. And when they did, it was the healing method. So very similarly, they would find parts within themselves and then discover the spacious, aware dimension that gave them relief and healing, and was able to have the capacity to work with traumatized parts of themselves. And so then my wife, Paige, who's a therapist and has done IFS training for years, was a PA recently. She went and just did a weekend with Dick because one of her colleagues said that she might enjoy it, and she went and she came back and said, this guy does the same thing you do except upside down. What she meant by that is that he really works with the parts in order to get to the self, whereas I would listen to the parts but immediately try to introduce self, because in my experience, if self is going to work with parts, you have to know what self is. Otherwise, how do you know you're not working with a self-like part, or you're not working with another smart psychological caretaking part?
Yeah.
Which I think many people are like, well, okay, maybe that's okay. And of course, just to say, parts-based therapy can get some relief and healing and psychological work done. It's just not on the level when you actually discover self itself, and the self in its true fullness is able to love and connect, is already naturally connected to the parts that then the unburdening is completely different from my experience.
Yeah.
So then I'll just say, so then I actually did a level 1 training with my wife, and I both did one, and then applied and did a presentation at one of the IFS conferences about 6 years ago. And Dick walked in the back, sat down, and watched everyone kind of just pop into self, like immediately as I did these series of exercises. And he said, my guides told me that I should go to lunch with you and we should work together. So that's his way of getting affirmation. And so we basically said, well, what's the first time we can do it? And he said, well, I'm teaching in Italy. You want to come and teach with me? And so off we went to, and we did about 3 or 4 of those, I think, 5-day retreats at Esalen and Italy, and started to kind of put together and see how, when both systems were together, there was quite a synergy.
Thanks, Doc. I just want to return to a couple of points you made there and then continue. One is, in conversations after your workshop with other IFS therapists, very similar languaging. We're talking about, oh, this is the other half. So it's like the upside down. But this is the complementary coming from here that then interfaces here with self coming into parts. And as Dick often says, in order to do the work of unburdening, you need a critical mass of self-energy. So it's not that IFS therapists have been doing it wrong if it's a self-like part, because there is healing there. And the capacity that you offer and introduce around, as I understand it, coming in with more self-energy from the place of self-essence, informing that, is just, I don't know if the word is deeper or more profound, or but another way of working with the model in a healing way, which takes it feels to me like a quantum leap. I don't know if that languaging is accurate.
Yeah, and it seems like, can self be with a part, or is it always a part with a little more or less self?
Right. Yes.
That has more self-energy. Yeah. That's a big question. Yeah. And some IFS therapists say, well, you can't really be in self. There's only a matter of degrees of self. And this experience from wisdom tradition is, no, you can be in self-essence that has self-energy, that is what is self-leadership, and that it isn't, and then that works with parts as a team. So so that's a unique, specific thing, which seems to be what Dick writes about and says, but there's different interpretations in the community.
My experience of Dick, his teaching and his writing, is that he's clear on self-energy and he's clear on self-leadership. Goes less into, in my experience, self-essence. So I would really love to hear your understanding of self-essence and then how that informs both self-energy and self-leadership.
Yeah, beautiful. So, so the, I'll just say that often there's a distinguishing of self-like parts that critiques kind of a caretaker part or psychological smart part, is where many people are with a certain amount of self-energy, or a mindful witness, which is a detached viewer. And then the other one, which is not so much talked about, which is talked about more in wisdom traditions, is subtle mind and then subtle energy. So you can go into subtle energy and feel like you have this vibration and sensation and think it's subtle, think it's self-energy, but really it's kind of like a psychic or energetic. It's like the preliminary practice. If you just say Om, Om, you can go into perception that drops you out of the managing part, but then takes you into a similar type of subtle mind, subtle body, subtle energy, which is still not self-energy and is not self-essence. So, those, just to distinguish those kind of classical self-like parts.
Sure, thank you.
Before we go into what self-essence is. So, just to say that, Dick has the 5 P's of self-leadership, which is patience, persistence, playfulness, perspective, and presence. And then the 8 C's of self-energy, which are the relational qualities and they're also personality qualities. So it's interesting that I won't talk about today, but they're actually essential qualities of self-essence that are like stillness, silence, unconditional love. That's even another level. But these can be tricky because any part can be calm, courageous, curious, have clarity, compassion with a small c, connectedness, confidence, or creativity. But those are the qualities that, if they have kind of essential courage, is different than just, oh, this part is willing to be with that other part. It has some courage. But courage, when it comes from self-essence to self-energy instead of subtle body energy, is a different, you could use the same word for it, but it is quantumly different.
Yes. Yeah.
So the self-essence, which is prior to, and probably the way to distinguish part of being in a part, which has a location, just as, are you aware of a part in your body? Where is it? Can you find it? Can you flesh it out? Does it have a shape, size, color, boundary? Self-essence, by nature, is not a part, is not your ego. It's not an observing ego. It's not a hypnotic or altered state. It's not an image or your imagination. It's not an archetype or a separate soul. It's not a guide or an inner voice. It's not subtle energy. It's not a core state. It's not an entity or a person who's your age today. It's not a meditator or a mindful witness. It actually has the feeling of not being a part, is not having a location. So in other words, it's everywhere and within everything. So since he did 5, 8, then I just went to 11. So I have 11 eyes of self-essence, since we're going up by 3. So it's just a fun way to, okay, you want to play that game? Let's play the game of P's and C's, and now I'll do small I's.
Yeah, it's like it sounds like competitive alliteration to me.
So the 11 I's of self-essence are the felt sense experience, not intellectual, not. So when you're blended with a part and you ask the part to give you some space, the first key is that there is self-essence, is that awake space, rather than it going from blended to a part, transitional space to another part. It actually opens to these 11 eyes. So the 11 eyes are, it's invisible, but intelligent. So it's invisible, but it has a knowing quality. Invisible, there's no location, no boundary, and yet it's within everything. So it feels equally infinite and immediate, are the next two.
Mhm.
So invisible and knowing or intelligent. Infinite means its limit doesn't have a limit or a boundary like a part, but it's immediate, meaning it's equally inside and out. It's not spacious. It's not a witness consciousness from outside. It's actually more intimate, which is one of the other ones, but infinite and immediate.
Mhm.
It's innate, which is really what I think the main point of Dick saying that it's a process of subtraction, meaning that you're not creating self, but you're opening space, subtracting the blending, and then you'll discover, oh, the self is already here. It's innate. And then it's indestructible, meaning it can't be hurt, that when you're aware from self-essence, it's not hurtable. The image they use in the wisdom traditions is it's like shooting an arrow through air. The arrow can't hurt the sky. So it can't be hurt. It
Mhm.
feels that there's a dimension that's changeless, that's invisible, intelligent, infinite, immediate, and then always already here. And then indestructible. And it's ineffable means that your mind can't know it. You can't exactly put a word on it or know it from thought.
Mhm.
There's nothing. And if you try to, am I aware of the invisible self? If you go back, you can't go back to the mind for a second opinion to know it. You have to literally feel it directly. So what I often say is that you go from conceptual or thought-based knowing in the part to not knowing to the not knowing that knows. So the not knowing that knows is like riding a bicycle. It's like more like a perception or felt sense. Are you balancing on the bicycle? You don't have to go to thought. Am I aware of self-essence from the spacious and pervasive field of awareness? And the direct knowing is a palpable, immediate feeling of expansiveness and pervasiveness and unconditional love. It's intimate, that's the next one. So ineffable, but intimate. So intimate means it's not an observing, you're not caught in what I call the witness protection program of looking from a mindful witness or even a big sky witness, that there's the fabric of love, the unconditional love, is intimately knowing. If you are aware of a part, you're aware both from everywhere, from a kind of an intermediate location, which is why people can get stuck in that feeling, but you're also intimately connected. The self is knowing the part from within the part, not from any distance. So it's multi-dimensional.
Mhm.
And the intimate is the sense that you're not, it's spacious, but you're not spaced out. It's actually more intimate because you feel your body from within your body. And then it's inspired, which means feels like spirit. People describe it as the spirit, or inspired also means it's not just passive, but it has a new motivation from love. So not quite an agenda, but it has a natural interconnectedness that's motivated to be in the world from this new sense of self-essence. And then it's illuminated, which means there's some kind of clear light or bright feeling of not only everything's kind of lit up from within, and there's a support from a greater illumination that is greater than yourself, that's often called clear light. And then the last one of the 11 is just is. It just there's an isness or a being. You don't need to say anything. Oh, just are you aware from a part? No. Where are you aware from? I'm aware from self-essence, the coming into self-energy that's connected to self-leadership, and it just is. It's happening by itself. So those are the little pointers toward.
I want to share with you, look, as I'm listening to you, I'm having the same experience I had at your workshop. Your words are resonating in such a way that I can just feel my system shifting just with the words. So you call them little pointers, which I love. But, and this may be the experience of people listening or not, but certainly mine. I can just feel the greater opening, even as you're talking. So
yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the sense, is that the pointing is like the normal process in IFS. Are you aware of the part? Can you ask it from some space? There's a subtraction there, but then it's no longer subtraction. Now it's an action. Are you aware of it? How do you feel toward it? And then what I add is, how do you feel toward the part now? Are you aware of the part? Yes. Are you aware of yourself? So feel the dimensionality or quality of self. So you make sure you're in self as you begin the work, and then there's ways to check it as you're halfway through and starting the unburdening and things like that.
Yeah, and I want to come to that a little later. I want to continue on this thread for a moment because that sounds very clear to me as a descriptor of self-essence, of the ground, what I think of as the ground of being.
Yes.
And then from that, we can look at self-energy, which you describe as relational, and then self-leadership, which you describe as action. So could you speak a little more about the dynamic expressions then of from self-essence as that manifests?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like hydrogen and oxygen become humidity, become rain, become water, become ice. It's all like a dynamic progression of getting out of part-based conditioning to access self-essence. And then as self-essence, the key is that it remains, as you say, the ground. So the self-essence remains primary as it arises into energy and quality and natural quality. So in one tradition of Mahamudra tradition of Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism, they say that awakening is not just the absence of self or part space, but the presence of flourishing of positive qualities. So they're made of the ground. They're not that the self-essence is this passive space in which things are coming and going. There's a feeling of interconnectedness or unity. So the movement from stepping out into freedom or peace or space or silence or stillness, and then as soon as there's a movement toward toward formation, from space to energy to form, these natural qualities are kind of like the fabric. So it moves from invisible to calm, to a clarity, and then compassion, from unconditional love to compassion. Connectedness is, and then these more qualities again of courage, confidence, creativity. So they're natural, like lines of or fabric of of that which is essentially human, as our what's called basic goodness or basic potential, when we're not all confused and in a part and protecting against and just focused on trying to survive. And then as we embody in this relational to our parts and relation to our body as a part. So that's one of the key things I often find is one of the most helpful things from self-essence, to start to realize there are parts within parts, and your body is a part. So you're literally, your physical mind body is not you, the age you are today or anything. It's one of the parts that from self-essence, you can realize, oh, that's not me, that's a part of me. It's not me, but it's not even the center of me. The centerless center is this self, and then it's arising as this body and mind and personality, and then conditioning. And from the self-essence, there are these qualities of love and courage and toward the parts and toward your body, which relaxes your body, allows you to be realize that the other traumas and exiles are not bigger than who you are. And then the qualities of, and then coming into self-leadership, I think the key is that from self-essence and the qualities of self-energy, which is this coming into energy, and then form, when you walk around, it feels like you've dropped from head to heart. So one of the questions sometimes in IFS is, are you aware from your head or from your heart of this part? And so there's this open-hearted awareness, or this what's called bodhicitta in the Eastern tradition, which is awake consciousness, which has this quality of heart-mind, that you feel like you're able to lead from self and lead the parts from self, not just have one part that's a manager with more self. And then those qualities of patience and playfulness, persistence, perspective, and presence, which is maybe the most essential one, is kind of a presence, which is probably the word that links self-essence is invisible to self-energy to self-leadership. There's a presence that is multi-dimensional, that feels like beingness or presence, that is the foundation of your ability to respond and be creative and act from there.
Thank you, Loch. Your distinction between self-essence, self-energy, and self-leadership has, for me, resolved a paradox that I've been sitting with for 20 years or something. I've had in my life, in my experience, I've had the experience of self-essence, and I remember it. I'm not always in it by any means, but I remember in that space just an awareness of the interconnectedness of everything and the perfection of everything. There is essence is simply perfection. The paradox is, when I'm not in that state, or what's felt paradoxical and contradictory, is there's stuff that needs to be addressed. There are imbalances in the world. There are imbalances in the system. So how can the absolute perfection of being coexist with living in the day-to-day through time and the need to act? And your presentation there just resolves that for me, because it's not a paradox. Both are true, depending on from where I'm operating at any given moment.
That's right. Beautiful. Yeah, that's really what the Buddhist word or term people may have heard, non-dual, means. So in more of the Advaita tradition, non-dual is sometimes used as for pure awareness, the non-dual awareness. But in Buddhism, it's the inseparable pair of awareness and appearance. So the ground is the unchanging, and then the dynamic expression, the dancing aliveness of pleasant and unpleasant, human, likes and dislikes, pain and happiness are all the human are part of the human dimension of life, and they're not going away. So often, as you say, people get it and lose it, get it and lose it, or meditate and try to de-stress and then have to go back to a manager that's doing the best it can, has a little more self-energy. But this is this fluid ocean of awareness that's arising as this wave, interconnected with everyone else. Storms happen, weather happens, but the sky is never hurt.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
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 I'm going to ask you to expand a little more on, you mentioned the transcendent clear light of essence, the transcendent clear light of awareness. And then I know you also talk about the light of compassion and the light of wisdom in action. Could you expand a little bit on those qualities?
Yeah. So that, that's, again, this is so interesting because I try to use multidimensional language. Some people like more, invisible, and some people like clear light, and some people like, because they're the same, but they resonate differently with different people. So in some ways I used ocean and wave, and now you're using light. I use light as that, and you're resonating with that. And some people may feel that the clear light of self-essence, the compassionate light of self-energy, and then the wisdom light of self-leadership. So there's a something that is the same in all of them, yes. And then they have different expressions: purity, compassion, and wisdom in action. So it gives a metaphor for the ineffable, that which can't be explained.
Yes.
Gives you some little map or just pointer to, oh, that's what's the same. It's all this clear light that's appearing as different forms of light in the prism of light, multicolored. First it's clear, then it goes through the prism, has these qualities, then it's active. You're able to act from it in this way that's resourced, that's sourced with it, rather than feeling it's a meditation state or a, that this is about a shift of identity. That's why it's so profound, that this is self. Self is what heals, not parts. Parts can heal a little bit, but self is that which has the capacity to bear what seems to be unbearable, to unburden the deeper, complex trauma. Because any small manager, no matter how smart or capable, no matter how much self, it's not big enough, it's not strong enough to handle the power of terror and rage, and so we need to really find that that vast, loving, unconditionally loving presence that's like the sky in a storm, with a storm cloud. It's like, okay, I'm in the storm cloud, and I'm around the storm cloud, and the storm cloud's got a lot of lightning, and I'm a lot bigger than it. I'm above it, below it, within it, and I hear you. You're really getting this really stormy. Yep, I'm here. I'm with you. What else you need to say? And that felt sense. That's not a theory, but you really feel that that's the thing, is that feeling of spacious and pervasive is not a psychological or something we've learned in culture. The only place it's a marker, other than just the advanced experiences of meditators, is in what's called a flow state or flow consciousness, which has been studied by Csikszentmihalyi, of people who are optimally functioning, like a concert violinist who's playing in the middle of a orchestra and just has studied how to do something with their manager part, to play an instrument, and then all of a sudden the self takes over. They're interconnected with all the other players. They're out of their ego. They're in the now. Time slows down. They feel a sense of joy and optimal performance, and so that's probably everyone has had an experience of that. And if you feel and look, you'll feel, oh, I'm more open-minded, open-hearted, spacious, and interconnected. I'm also here, equally here and everywhere and nowhere and interconnected. And that feeling of self is the difference between a part, which is located, even a meditator part or subtle energy part has a location and a limitation. So that becomes the first unique like feeling that people at first, some parts can get scared. They think it's depersonalization or dissociation or out of control, because you have to let go of the control of a manager. But the method that we can use in relation to part is just let the parts know, okay, I'm just going to the kitchen to get some food. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to resource with the self. Now as the self, not going to leave, I'm just opening to actually give you what you have been looking for, which is love.
Yes.
Are you willing to, step back or wait or hang out or just feel your feelings and just see what happens in literally 3 seconds to 3 minutes?
Yeah.
And then come back and then be with that anxious part or that doubting part or that, and then that part is like, oh, that's pretty good. I didn't realize that was what it was. I was, where did you go and what did you get? So it'll start to, go, well, that's new. How did you do that? So, and then it's like, this is good. I like this. So those protective parts, which have kept us contracted into part-based systems. That's the main thing. The protectors are protecting against big volume of emotion, and they're protecting against dissociation or spacing out, in which then someone says, where are you? What's going on? Why are you so long? Oh, right, I better come back and be part of the world, otherwise I'm going to get more yelled at. And so that contraction for safety has this opposite. No, it's open and include. That's safety.
Yes.
Drop, open, include, drop. And then when people do that and familiarize themselves with self essence, self energy, self leadership, then from there the unburdening is a completely different world. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Loch. I appreciate your use of metaphor and language and pointers, because as we know, the map is not the territory, but you're describing a very lovely map which invites us into the territory. And one way that I like the language when I'm teaching is because of the contractions of the parts and the fears usually of overwhelm, is that nothing can overwhelm compassion. And I love your image of the sky, because there is nothing that can overwhelm compassion, because it's the ground, because it's the place on which we dance. So I'm loving how you're languaging this. I would like to ask you, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if you'd be willing to, one of your exercises that you shared with us in the workshop, to help discern when I may be, in a self-like part that's well-intentioned and feels compassion and cares, and how to be able to discern that state from the more open, boundless sense of self, being more in self. Could you take us through an exercise that will help us with that?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll do. There's a few of them, and I've developed a whole bunch that are available for those who are interested in on free YouTubes and SoundCloud, and in my book, both of my books. But so the part that we can start to work with, and I often find is a way to introduce yourself or your clients to this, is sometimes if they come in and say, well, what would you like to work on today? Oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. Okay, well, let's start with the part that came in here and is sitting here and is listening to me. What? Yeah, that manager, that manager that's just feeling kind of okay and sitting here and listening. So this is one of the keys, is that to distinguish, to kind of put the wisdom tradition and IFS together, is the usual small sense of self, the ego center, the manager part that's organizing. Usually there's one of them, but then there's often, they rotate through different commentators, and so there's like a seat of the self, but usually there's a listener and a learner and a so that part, just to feel the location of where you're listening from. So usually it's in the middle of your head, behind your eyes, looking out. And it's hard for that part, can't see itself. It's got to almost immediately say, are you aware of that part? And just to say, as soon as you say that to a client or to yourself, are you aware of that part? You've now opened, usually, to a self-like part that is aware. So you almost naturally, you're not likely to go from a part to self-essence unless you know it. So you're going to start in a transitional part that is helpful, that you're going to have to then become aware of as a part. So that's where we're going. So I'm just kind of giving you a little map ahead of time so you can both understand it and then do it. So to feel that part that's listening, that's trying to understand, that is here now, are you aware of that part that's listening? Where's the listener? Where's the hearer? Where's the thinker, the understander? And just see if you can find that part in or around your body. And then become aware of where you're aware of that part from. So feel that. So immediately, okay, I'm aware of that part, it's here, there. So now be aware, are you aware of that part? Yes, but now curiously, well, where is that part aware from? And usually it's in or around your body. And usually it's kind of, it's got some space. So, or you could say, are you feeling that part? Can you ask that part to give you some space? Now are you aware of that part? Now are you aware? Can you be aware of that part? And can you ask that part if it can give you some space? And now, as you open, just be aware of not finding a location or a part. Go behind or turn around. Don't keep pulling the camera back. Look behind the camera. Open beyond any imagined boundary or location, just far enough so you go beyond physical, mental, energetic boundary to discover a kind of spacious awareness that's already aware, that you're aware of. And then curiously, are you aware of that spacious awareness, or what's it like if you're aware from this spacious awareness? And just check that it has no boundary this way. It's boundless, limitless. And then just notice that because it's limitless, it's also equally inside and outside. It's open-minded, open-hearted, spacious and pervasive. And just see what it's like when you look with awareness. Where are you aware from? Where are you aware of? What was this thinker, hearer, manager, or this one that was given space to be aware of. They may be there or they may not be there now, or they may be resting, or they may just be a part that's easy to feel, or it may just feel like you're aware of your body. So just be aware of the potential to form a part here, to ask for some space and form a mindful witness, or to drop into a energetic part of you that's emotionally connected to that part or to your body, and then just go beyond energy, go beyond what may feel like an imagined boundary until you find this awake space, and just curiously feel whether you're aware of that, and then as that, and then from that, feel that quality of awareness. And then just notice that the first movement of energy or movement or vibration, just feel whether it's like an ocean of awareness made of the ground of being, of the awareness. So it's interconnected. And then you can feel like you can ask, how do you feel toward this part, or this observing part, or this mental manager that's worked so hard to try to be you? So just see how you feel toward it from self-essence, and then as it comes from everywhere and nowhere and here, see if the unconditional love comes into a kind of compassion that's interconnected with it. So it's not just subject-object. There is something like that that's from everywhere, from a kind of transitional, relational, and from this interconnected, energetic, same. How do you feel toward this part that's part of you? How do you feel toward your body, which is part of you, arising like a wave in the ocean of this awareness, rising like from clear light to compassionate light to the light of wisdom, which sees, oh, these parts are all fine. There's no bad parts. They're just confused and hurt and wanting the love that's here now. So just begin to feel that relational quality of self to parts, self to self, self to parts, self to world. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so the teachings that I have from Dick have always been incredibly helpful, and I remain indebted for life to him. Which is, opening a session by becoming aware of my parts so that I can hold more self-energy. When I add this to my practice, when I'm sitting in front of a client and I take the time to notice my parts and then move into this kind of practice, which is still new for me, I can feel that opening. And something you said in your workshop that really resonated was something like, let your parts know there is no problem to solve here. So all of those parts can pull back, and then to be with the client in what feels to me like just a healing conversation. It's like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
What's going on in your system?
What's going on in your system?
Yeah.
And you have you have the courage in case one of their parts is really in need of. And just to say, one of the distinctions that was made by Tanya Singer between empathy and compassion makes sense here to help distinguish between subtle body energy, which many people, I probably, at one point I did a maybe one-on-one with maybe 50 or 60 different IFS therapists, and many of them, probably 58 out of 60, were in either in the subtle body energy or in this mindful witness or this compassionate caretaker. And then they were all able to say, oh my God, that's so subtly different, but so dramatic. So the ones who are in the subtle energy that they're calling how much self energy, like Tanya Singer talked about, if you're with a client, you can feel empathetically connected through energy. So especially people who are highly sensitive people or have kind of a psychic ability, but you're merged and you're kind of taking on their energy. If you're in self energy, there's like, oh, I can feel them, I have compassion, but it's like almost like empathetic union. So, oh, I'm connected, I'm compassionate, but what happens is you've got to see the self-essence behind their back and the self-essence behind your back, so that you go straight through, so that their pain doesn't just come here and go back here. It goes through to this compassionate self that's able to feel connected to their exiled parts from unconditional love and from compassion with a big C, which is different than empathetic distress, which
Indeed.
if you're in subtle energy, calling it self energy, you can kind of burn out.
Yeah, I really appreciate the distinction, Locke. It mirrors, I love Tanya Singer's work, and it mirrors when I teach this, because unfortunately, to date, many counselors and therapists have been told you have to put yourself in the client's shoes. You have to come into that empathic resonance. And if I'm coming into an empathic resonance of distress, I'm at risk for vicarious traumatization, and particularly with people that work with trauma repeatedly. And it's not just not necessary, it's just not as helpful either. So, you know, as you're aware, the research indicates that compassion is actually neurologically rejuvenating. Whereas coming from empathic resonance, which is a distressed empathic resonance, that's when we can feel exhausted after a session. So I really appreciate your clarity on the distinction there.
Yeah. And I think the compassion she's talking about is self energy.
Yes.
So in other words, she's calling it compassion as if it's just like a quality, but it's like, well, when you're in that and you feel almost like you're a window, and you have like somebody's like you feel it, but it goes right through this gossamer curtains to awareness that has your back. That comes forward through your heart mind to compassionately be with them just as they are, not try to fix them, not try to take on not to feel like you have to, as you say, resonate or vibrate with them or match their energy, that you're actually with them without matching their energy. You're letting them, but you're feeling it, but it's not stopping at your body or at your, it goes through to self-essence. That's why self-essence is so important, to feel like it has this space and sky-like capacity to be with that storm wherever it is.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I could keep chatting to you for hours, frankly, but I'm aware that we need to wrap this up at some point. I'm going to make sure all of your contact information is posted on the video. I just want to thank you again so much for your teaching, your wisdom, your willingness to share. And I hope next year maybe you can be available for another workshop in the masterclass series, because I know you keep developing and building, which is just so inspiring for me to be aware of. So thank you again.
Yeah,
and
you're so welcome. Thank you so much for hosting and for sharing. And I love helping people who help others. So
thank you.
I thank everyone. I thank you that help others, and I thank everyone who's a therapist listening to this for your great compassion to show up and find a way to recognize yourself that can be with your own awakening and with others who are suffering, and really help them unburden.